Hey everyone, this is Grisha from CodeLab, and today this video is on how to write CRUD requests to and from our MongoDB database. For this tutorial, we should already have MongoDB and a basic Express server set up from the past videos. First things first, we'll first go into how to connect our database to our Express server. We have line 2 over here that initializes the MongoDB package so that we can use it in our web application, and it has the same syntax as Express from before. Next, we'll go over the .env file. So this environment file is a hidden file that hides from GitHub so that no one can get access to our keys or URIs. In this case, this is where we store our Atlas URI from our MongoDB database. And when we create our database, we can retrieve this URI and save it in this file over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to first load our environment variables onto the server.js, and this is so that we can get access to whatever URI we have over here or any other keys when we use it later. Next, we're going to use this URI to connect our MongoDB. So here, we're just loading the key from our environment file, and we can use this syntax to connect it. I'm not really going to go over it. You can just copy and paste it. But this is what it would look like. And I'll briefly pause here. Okay, now we'll move on to Crud Routes, which basically stands for create, read, update, and delete. These requests are important to manage our data, whether we would want to add new data, modify existing data, or just read from it. To program the basic CRUD operations, we first need a model to work off of. So let me pull that up right now. So this model follows a schema that outlines what fields the document should have and allows us to perform our MongoDB operations on. So MongoDB requires us to have a certain format of our data, and we can't just throw it all together. And it does give a default timestamp whenever an object is created. And basically this allows us to show how all new data should be structured, and MongoDB won't be surprised if we get a new field. It'll throw an error if there's some kind of unknown thing. Okay, next we'll go over the routes itself. This is the first route, which is the post request. And what this is basically it creates another route called add. So what this means is we already have our localhost 5000 items, and this is simply just going to have another add route. And what it's going to do is basically, this is a post request, which it gets a request object and a response object. A request object basically contains all the user information required to create our new item, and it would have in its body the quantity and images, which we both save to variables, and then we will create a new item based on that data and save it. And our response object is basically if our item was successfully saved or if there was an error. And whenever there's an error, it'll log a status of 400, and it'll also record a JSON object with the error. Next is the GET request, where it's a similar syntax, but this time instead of just add, we need a get and the ID of the item. So it would look just like this. Oh, it would look just like this, but it would also have, let's say the item ID is 35 or something. It would look something like this. It wouldn't have such a simple ID, but similar to that. And then we have this new method called find by ID, using the ID we get. And the ID is stored in the request object under params. And then it will just, if it's successful to retrieve the item, it would log the item itself onto the response. Otherwise, it'll log the error. Now, update is pretty much the same as get request in terms of it needs the ID, and it also does the method find by ID. And instead of just saving the item in the response, it'll go ahead and update the quantity You can also update the images if you'd like, and it'll save it, and it'll tell if it's successful or if it's an error in the response object. And delete request is a little bit different in the sense that instead of find by ID, there's a find by ID and delete. And it'll actually go ahead and log that item into the response object, and if there's an error, it'll log it. And this is going back to server.js, as I mentioned before, on line 8. Okay, so these are the 4 CRUD routes that we would need for our MongoDB. And I'll hold it up later, but there's one last thing we need to do, and that is, as all user input, we need to parse our data. So basically what this is a body parser, and it'll sort between all the user inputs. And it's basically accounting for all the edge cases, because we cannot expect the user input to be absolutely perfect. Let's say our quantity is 2, but our 2 could come in with extra spaces like this, or it could come in just like with 1 extra space, or however. But this body parser does a good job of getting rid of all these extra spaces and turning it into JSON so that our CRUD routes can easily access it without any extra other user input to throw all our data off. But yeah, I shall now hold this on screen for some time so that you can copy it. So this is our post request, and these are our other 3.